June 12, 1942, Amsterdam, Netherlands. Morning light spills through the lace curtains of a cozy apartment on Mervedeplein, casting warm patterns on the wooden floor. A teenage girl with dark curls and bright eyes tears open the wrapping on her gift, her fingers trembling with excitement. It's a diary, red-checkered, autograph book style, with a small lock. Anne Frank, just turned 13, clutches it to her chest, her laughter echoing softly in the room. But outside, the distant rumble of trucks and the shuffle of boots on cobblestone streets hint at a world closing in. You can almost smell the fresh ink as she opens it, feel the weight of unspoken fears in the air. In that moment, Anne had no idea this simple book would become her confidant, her escape, her voice in the darkness. Born in Frankfurt, Germany in 1929, Anne was the spirited younger daughter of Otto and Edith Frank, a Jewish family fleeing the rising tide of Nazi hatred. They had escaped to Amsterdam in 1933, where Otto built a business selling spices and pectin for jams. Life seemed normal. School, friends, movie stars plastered on her walls. But by 1940, the Nazis invaded the Netherlands and the noose tightened. Yellow stars sewn on coats, curfews, banned from parks, cinemas, even bicycles. Anne's world shrank, but her spirit didn't. She dreamed of Hollywood, flirted with boys, argued with her sister Margot. That diary? She named it Kitty, pouring her heart into it from day one. "Dear Kitty," she wrote that first entry, her pen scratching eagerly. "I hope I will be able to confide everything to you, as I have never been able to confide in anyone." Her words were vivid, unfiltered, a mix of teenage angst and sharp observations. She described the ping of her heart when a boy smiled at her, the frustration of sharing a room with Margot. But beneath it all lurked the war. Air raid sounds wailing in the night, whispers of deportations, friends vanishing overnight. Then the call-up notice arrived on July 5, 1942. Margot, 16, summoned for labor service in Germany, a euphemism for horror. Otto Frank acted fast. He had prepared a hiding place in the rear annex of his office building at Prinsengracht 263. The next morning, under a gray sky heavy with rain, the family slipped out, wearing layers of clothes to avoid suspicion. Anne stuffed her diary into her satchel, along with movie postcards and a comb. They walked silently through the streets, hearts pounding, blending into the crowd. At the office, they climbed the steep stairs to the Secret Annex, a cramped two-floor space behind a movable bookcase. 4 rooms, a tiny attic, shared with another family, the Van Pels, Herman, Auguste, and their son Peter, and later dentist Fritz Pfeffer. Imagine it. The musty smell of old wood and spices from the warehouse below. The constant hush, footsteps muffled on creaky floors. No flushing toilets during work hours. Blackout curtains sealing them from the world. Anne shared a room with Pfeffer, whom she dubbed Dussel for his fussiness. Meals were sparse. Potatoes, kale, whatever helpers like Miep Gies and Bep Voskoil smuggled in at risk of their lives. Otto's employees became their lifeline, bringing news, food, hope. Yet in this confinement, Anne's voice bloomed. She wrote feverishly, sometimes by candlelight, capturing the raw humanity of their existence. The bickering over food portions, Auguste Van Pels snapping at Edith, Peter's awkward teenage crush on Anne, their stolen kisses in the attic amid sacks of beans. The terror of Allied bombings shaking the walls, plaster dust raining down. "The airplanes drone overhead," she noted, "and we crouch in the dark, praying." But also moments of joy, a strawberry from the outside world, tasting like freedom. A radio broadcast of Churchill's speeches, igniting sparks of defiance. Anne's entries evolved, from girlish dreams, "I want to be a journalist or famous," to profound reflections on prejudice, love, identity. "Who has inflicted this upon us?" she questioned. "Who has made us Jews different from all other people?" Her words cut deep, exposing the absurdity of hatred. She observed her own growth, the two Annes, the cheerful outer shell and the sensitive soul within. You can feel her isolation, the ache for fresh air, for normalcy. I long to ride a bike, dance, whistle, look at the world, feel young, and know that I'm free. But freedom was an illusion. Outside, the Nazis intensified their hunt, roundups in the streets, trains to Westerbork, then Auschwitz. The annex dwellers lived on a knife's edge, one wrong noise away from discovery. Anne wrote of her fears, but also her unyielding optimism. In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. As the war dragged on into 1943, tensions in the annex simmered. Quarrels erupted like small explosions. Anne clashed with her mother, feeling misunderstood, unloved. Yet she found solace in her father, Pim, and in Peter, their budding romance, a fragile light in the gloom. She dreamed of the future, of publishing her diary as a testament. Little did she know, the world was about to crash in. And then, on a sweltering August morning in 1944, the bookcase swung open. Boots thundered up the stairs. Betrayal had found them. What would become of Anne's words hidden in the chaos? The Betrayal and the End of Hope. August 4th, 1944, 10:30 a.m., Prinsengracht 263, Amsterdam. The summer heat presses against the sealed windows of the secret annex, the air thick with the scent of aging spices drifting up from the warehouse below. 8 people move quietly through their routines, Otto reading a book, Edith peeling potatoes, Anne and Peter stealing a moment in the attic. Then, without warning, the bookcase creaks open. Heavy boots hit the stairs. A voice barks in German, "Raus! Hands up!" You can almost taste the panic. Hearts stop. Papers scatter. Green uniformed policemen and SS officers storm in, guns drawn, led by SS Oberscharführer Karl Silberbauer. The helpers downstairs, Miep Gies, Bep Voskuil, Johannes Kleiman, Victor Kugler, are rounded up too. Someone had tipped off the authorities. A phone call, a whisper. The betrayer's identity remains a shadow to this day. Perhaps a warehouse worker, perhaps someone closer. But in that instant, it didn't matter. 2 years and 1 month of hiding ended in minutes. The annex is ransacked. Suitcases are demanded, whatever clothes they can grab. Anne's diary pages, loose sheets covered in her looping handwriting, are flung across the floor in the chaos. Miep, watching helplessly, sees them scattered like fallen leaves. Silberbauer stuffed Otto's briefcase with valuables, but the writings, the heart of it all, are left behind, trampled under boots. The 8 are marched downstairs, loaded into a truck, the streets of Amsterdam blurring past as curious onlookers stare. First to Gestapo headquarters, then to the overcrowded Wiederingschans prison. 3 days later, they're transferred to Westerbork, the Dutch transit camp, a bleak place of barbed wire and barracks where thousands awaited deportation. Anne, still clutching hope, noted in her mind the irony. After 2 years locked away, she could finally see the sky again. Blue, endless, cruelly beautiful. But the sky wouldn't stay visible for long. On September 3rd, 1944, the last train from Westerbork left for Auschwitz. The Franks, the Van Pels, and Fritz Pfeffer were on it. 1,019 people crammed into cattle cars. No water, no sanitation, doors sealed. 3 days and nights of suffocating darkness, screams, thirst. When the doors finally slid open at Auschwitz-Birkenau, floodlights blinded them, dogs snarled, SS men shouted orders, men separated from women. Otto saw his family for the last time as they were herded away. Anne, Margot, Edith, and August Van Pels were sent to the women's camp. Shaved heads, striped uniforms, tattooed numbers. Anne became A25063. The cold Polish autumn bit into their bones. Roll calls at dawn in freezing mud, starvation rations, disease everywhere. Edith grew weak, her body wasting away.
Anne and Margot clung to each other, whispering memories of the annex, of strawberries and Peter's kisses, trying to keep their humanity alive. Then, in late October 1944, selection again. The sisters, still relatively strong, were chosen for labor transport. Edith stayed behind, alone. Anne and Margot were loaded onto another train, this time to Bergen-Belsen, a concentration camp in northern Germany, already swollen beyond capacity. No gas chambers there, but death came just as surely: typhus, starvation, despair. Bergen-Belsen in winter 1944-45 was hell without flames. No barracks for the new arrivals, just open fields ringed by wire. Thousands slept in the mud under rags, corpses piled up faster than they could be buried. Anne and Margot, separated from their mother forever, shared a filthy barrack with hundreds of others. Lice crawled everywhere. Fever spread like fire. Food: a slice of bread, watery soup with rotten vegetables. Anne's once bright eyes dulled, her body thinned to bone. Yet even here, witnesses later recalled her spirit flickering. She spoke to others through the barbed wire, trading stories for a crust of bread. She dreamed aloud of liberation, of becoming a writer. But the cold was relentless, the hunger endless. Margot fell ill first, typhus. Anne nursed her as best she could, whispering comfort. Then Anne caught it too. In March 1945, just weeks before British troops liberated the camp on April 15th, both sisters died. Anne was 15 years old. Their bodies, emaciated and fever-ravaged, were thrown into one of the mass graves. No markers, no prayers, just silence. Of the 8 from the Secret Annex, only Otto Frank survived. Liberated from Auschwitz by the Soviets in January 1945, he made his way back to Amsterdam, clinging to the fragile hope that his daughters had somehow endured. But back in Prinsengracht 263, something miraculous had survived the raid. Miep Gies, returning to the empty, ransacked annex, found Anne's papers scattered across the floor. She gathered every page, every notebook, every loose sheet, without reading them, and locked them in her desk drawer. She held on to them, praying she could one day return them to the girl she loved like a daughter. When Otto returned in June 1945, thin, broken, and alone, Miep placed the diary in his hands. "Here is your daughter Anne's legacy," she said. Otto opened it, and for the first time he truly heard his daughter's voice, clear, brave, unbroken. What he read would soon force the entire world to listen.
June 1945. Amsterdam, Netherlands. Rain streaked down the windows of a quiet apartment on Meervedeplein, the same one the Franks had left 3 years earlier. Otto Frank, gaunt and hollow-eyed at 56, sits alone at a small table. In his trembling hands lies a stack of papers, notebooks, loose sheets, Anne's unmistakable handwriting covering every inch. Miep Gies stands nearby, tears in her eyes, having just handed him the bundle she rescued from the floor of the annex the day the Gestapo came. Otto opens the red-checkered diary first. The lock is broken, but the pages are intact. He begins to read. At first, just a few lines. Then he cannot stop. Anne's voice leaps from the paper, alive, sharp, funny, piercing. "I don't want to have lived in vain like most people," she had written. "I want to go on living even after my death." Otto's breath catches. He reads of her arguments with her mother, her dreams of kissing Peter under the attic skylight, her rage at the injustice swallowing the world. He reads passages he never knew existed, Anne's deepest thoughts about loneliness, God, humanity, thoughts she never shared with him, even in the closeness of the annex. Night after night he reads alone. The apartment is silent except for the scratch of his pen as he copies passages. Grief threatens to drown him, but Anne's words pull him back. They demand something of him. He begins to transcribe everything, every diary, every loose sheet of stories and reflections Anne had written during those 2 hidden years. The pile grows, over 300 pages of raw, unfiltered humanity. By 1946, Otto was ready to share. He types a clean manuscript and shows it to friends, historians, writers, survivors. Their reactions stun him. They weep openly. One Dutch historian, Annie Romain Verschoor, reads it and passes it to her husband Jan. Jan writes an article for the newspaper Het Parool on April 3, 1946, titled A Child's Voice. He calls it the most overwhelming document he has ever read, a voice that rises above the suffering and reaches straight into the heart. Publishers hesitate at first. Too personal, too soon. The world is still raw from war. But Otto persists. In June 1947, Contact Publishing in Amsterdam releases 3,036 copies of Het Achterhuis, the Secret Annex. The cover is simple, a photograph of the bookcase entrance. Inside, Anne's words, lightly edited by Otto to protect privacy and remove some family tensions, but never altered in spirit. The book sells out in days. A second printing follows, then a third. Readers write letters by the hundreds, ordinary Dutch citizens, teachers, mothers, teenagers, saying the same thing. I cannot put it down. She speaks for all of us. I feel like I knew her. Word spreads beyond the Netherlands. Translations appear, first German, then French, then English in 1952 as Anne Frank, The Diary of a Young Girl. Critics call it a masterpiece. Eleanor Roosevelt writes the introduction to the American edition. One voice speaks for 6 million, the voice not of a sage or a poet, but of an ordinary little girl. But it is not the critics who make the diary explode. It is the readers. Teenagers identify with Anne's crushes, her fights with parents, her dreams of fame. Adults confront the chilling normalcy of how hatred crept in. World leaders read it in private. When Otto travels to promote the book, he witnesses something extraordinary. Hardened politicians, generals, even former adversaries reduced to tears. One evening in Switzerland, a high-ranking German official approaches Otto after a reading, face wet, and whispers, "I did not know. I did not know." The diary forces the world to look, not at statistics, not at grainy newsreels of liberated camps, but at one irrepressible girl. Her laughter in the face of terror, her belief in goodness as evil closed in. 6 million became 1, and 1 became unforgettable. By the mid-1950s, millions of copies circulate in dozens of languages. Schools assign it, theaters adapt it. In 1955, a Broadway play opens, followed by the 1959 Oscar-winning film. Each retelling brings new waves of readers. Anne's face, those wide, knowing eyes from her 1942 portrait, becomes one of the most recognized in history. Yet for Otto, every milestone is bittersweet. He lives for Anne's words, dedicating his life to her message. He founds the Anne Frank House in 1960, turning Prinsengracht 263 into a museum so visitors can walk the steep stairs, stand behind the bookcase, feel the weight of the silence. Millions come. They leave notes. I will remember. I will be better. But Otto carries the burden alone. He remarried in 1953 to another survivor, Eva Schloss, whose daughter would later write her own memoir. Still, every night he thinks of his girls, of Margot's quiet strength, of Anne's final weeks in Bergen-Belsen, which he learns in fragments from survivors who saw her through the wire. One question haunts him and the world. Why Anne? Why did her voice cut through when so many others were silenced? The answer lies in the pages themselves. Anne did not write as a victim. She wrote as a girl, curious, flawed, hopeful, furious, alive. She turned horror into humanity. And now the diary was no longer hidden. It was everywhere. But the story was not finished. A new battle was beginning. One over memory itself. 1960. Prinsengracht 263, Amsterdam. The narrow canal house stands quiet on a spring morning, but inside, Hammers echo and sawdust swirls in the air. Workers restore the empty rooms behind the bookcase. Peeling wallpapers stripped away, floors sanded, the attic window cleaned for the first time in decades. Otto Frank walks the stairs slowly, his hand tracing the marks on the wall where Anne once measured her height. On May 3, 1960, the Anne Frank house opens its doors to the public. The first visitors step through the movable bookcase in silence, as if entering a sanctuary. They emerge, changed. You can almost hear the footsteps multiplying. Within months, thousands arrive, then tens of thousands. School groups, tourists, survivors, even former Nazis seeking atonement. They leave flowers at the base of the bookcase. They write in the guest book, "Never again. She lives in me now." By the 1970s, over 100,000 visitors a year climb those steep stairs. Today, more than 1.3 million come annually. Queues stretching down the canal, people waiting hours to stand in the very rooms where Anne dreamed, argued, and wrote. But the diary's reach extends far beyond the walls of one house. By the 1980s, it has been translated into over 70 languages, with more than 35 million copies sold worldwide. It becomes required reading in schools across Europe, America, Japan, South America. Teenagers in Tokyo underline the same passages as students in New York. I still believe, in spite of everything, that people are truly good at heart. Teachers report the same phenomenon. Classrooms fall silent when Anne's words are read aloud. No other Holocaust testimony achieves this intimacy. Not the towering memoirs of Elie Wiesel or Primo Levi, powerful as they are. Anne speaks as a peer, not a survivor scarred beyond recognition. She is frozen at 15, eternally relatable. Yet with fame comes danger. Deniers emerge from the shadows. In the 1950s, neo-Nazi pamphlets dismissed the diary as a forgery. By the 1970s, lawsuits erupt. Otto, frail but fierce, spends years in court defending its authenticity. Forensic experts examine the paper, ink, glue, proving every page dates to the war years. Handwriting analysts confirm Anne's distinctive script. Even glue samples from the red-checkered book match 1940s manufacturing. The courts rule decisively, genuine. Otto wins every case, but the attacks wound him deeply. He dies in 1980, at age 91, having devoted the last 35 years of his life to protecting his daughter's voice. After Otto's death, the fight continues. The Anne Frank Fonds in Basel, which he established, guards the copyright and funds education programs worldwide. But new threats appear. In the digital age, fragments of the diary are shared out of context. Unedited passages, Anne's sharp criticisms of her mother, her curious explorations of her body are weaponized by those claiming the book is inappropriate for children. School districts in the United States face challenges to remove it from curricula. Each time, students themselves rise up, petitions, protests, readings in school hallways. The diary survives every attempt to silence it again. In 2009, a new edition appears, the definitive edition, incorporating pages Otto had originally omitted to spare feelings, passages about Anne's strained relationship with Edith, her awakening sexuality, her biting observations of the Annex adults. Readers meet an even more complex Anne, flawed, fierce, fully human. Sales surge again. Visitors to the Anne Frank house today walk through empty rooms, the furniture removed at Otto's request to symbolize what was lost. Yet the space feels full. Quotes from the diary are etched into glass panels. Anne's movie star collages still cling to the wall in her old bedroom. In the attic, light pours through the same window she gazed from, dreaming of chestnut trees and freedom. Many stand there and weep without knowing why. Outside, the world keeps turning. Conflicts rage, Hatred surfaces in new forms. Anti-Semitism rises again in the 21st century. Synagogues attacked, Jewish students harassed, old tropes reborn online. Each time, Anne's words are invoked like armor. World leaders quote her in speeches. Activists print her belief in human goodness on protest signs. When Malala Yousafzai survives an assassination attempt, she reads the diary in the hospital and later says, "Anne Frank inspired me to keep hope alive." And still the question lingers. How did one girl's private thoughts become the conscience of humanity? Because Anne refused to let the darkness define her. She wrote not for posterity, but for survival. She turned fear into ink, isolation into conversation with Kitty. She insisted on seeing beauty even when surrounded by ugliness, and in doing so, she handed the world a mirror it could not look away from. 6 million voices were stolen, but one slipped through the cracks, clear, defiant, impossible to ignore. That voice still speaks today, in every language, in every classroom, in every heart willing to listen. And as long as it is read, Anne Frank goes on living, exactly as she wished.